All right, welcome back to the IIY podcast. Today, I got a new guest on today. Go ahead and introduce yourself, man.
Hey guys, I like to call myself the pernicious purveyor of preposterous pomposity and the paragon of pugilistic punditry, here to manipulate the minuscule minds of the masses of miscreants. The King of Connecticut, the Granimal, Matt Granahan. It's great to be on your show, man.
Yeah, man. Thank you for coming, man. I really appreciate it.
No problem. It's a pleasure.
So, I mean, kind of give a background of, like how you got into, because you do a lot of different stuff, but was, the wrestling first, or, what was your first step on this path? Because I know you're an author, a podcaster, you've done some booze distributing, and you also did a little bit of comedy too. Yeah.
Yeah, so I got involved in wrestling, competitive wrestling, when it's like seventh grade. I was a rambunctious kid, and that was kind of what calmed me down. And I had the honor of going back to my alma mater in Norwalk, Connecticut, in Norwalk High School, and headlining the fundraiser show to raise money for the new mats. I took on another guy that was a very good amateur wrestler and pro wrestler, Chase Brown, and I got to the cauliflower Chase Brown. I got to bust his own cauliflower over his head and headline that show. I went up there with my good buddy Dan the Beast Severn, who I've done a lot of clinics with and coaching clinics, and we got to do a coaching clinic for Job Fernandez, who's a new coach for my old high school for the Bears. Yeah, so I got into amateur wrestling and then judo. And when I got into judo, it was actually before the first UFC. And at that time, there were a lot of wrestlers in the early to mid 90s that were going into judo because we were very dominant because we could attack the legs. And they weren't good at defending leg attacks, single legs and double legs and snap downs into snap down rushes. We call them like snap downs into single legs. So that was a move I used a lot in the judo dojos. And then they made a rule, I think it was in 2006, to keep wrestlers out of judo, that you couldn't put a hand on the leg in competition from a standing position. That was to get wrestlers out. But that's where I started learning submissions, was in judo. And then also in the 90s, I had a buddy, Dave. We were both wrestling in college, and he had wrestled for a rival high school. And over the summer of between junior and senior year, he had already graduated, but it was between my junior and senior year in college. He told me that he was going into pro wrestling. And I said, man, I always want to be a pro wrestler. How do you get into that? And he was going to school at Killer Kowalski. A lot of people will remember, he's passed on, I'm sure now, but Killer Kowalski had in New England. And I never went to that school, but this was back before the days of YouTube where everybody could see everything. And Dave and I wrestled each other on a number of shows. That was how I got into it, as his opponent. And we developed a style that looked more like what you see now in what they call mixed martial arts. And then also around that time, I got involved in something that I write about in my book, Rough and Tumble, which was early no holds barred fighting before they called it UFC. And that was way back. That was in the 90s. And then I was around like 95. And it was more than 12 years later, 13 years later, when I came back and started competing in MMA, when I was on a severance and I was coaching with Kamal Shalarus in Austin, Texas, and he was doing MMA. And he said, man, you got to start fighting. So I was on my severance, and I was already in my 30s, my mid 30s, when I fought. And I had fought for 2 years, kind of as a bucket list thing in Florida and Georgia Alabama, and I did well. I was 4-1 pro. My one loss was due to a lot of people may know you can't knee an opponent in the head when they're on the ground. And it was actually a really good jiu-jitsu guy, Jeff Hammond. He was beating me in the fight, but on a scramble, I kneed him in the head when his knee was still on the ground, just out of, you get in the heat of it and you don't really think of the rules. And I lost the disqualification, but that was my only loss. I didn't have a long fight career. I did it, got in to get out, did it as a bucket list thing. And I cornered a lot of guys in grappling, because I had won some grappling tournaments. I won the Copa down here in Florida, the States, grappling, submission grappling. And I started cornering a lot of guys during that time period too. And then I got into broadcasting because my buddy Rob McCraw, who was one of my old teammates, he became matchmaker for a fight promotion that was running shows in pretty big venues. Like they ran at the Eagle Bank Arena that UFC ran in Fairfax, Virginia, and they were a southeastern regional promotion. They were pretty big, and they had local TV. They were on Comcast, and he had me. He said, you got such a big mouth. Let's see how you do. In the commentating, and I did like the Joe Rogan thing where I interview the winners and then called the fights, and got the opportunity to call fights with a number of legends, like my good friend, the UFC Hall of Famer, American Psycho, Stephan Bonner, guys like Merciless Ray Mercer, the legendary boxer, King Mo, who is a legendary fighter from Bellator. And I got into the Hall of Fame in 2017, in which you can see, I got my ring here. I got inducted alongside King Mo, which was a great honor. I didn't have the extensive fight career with all the fights, but it was a blend of things. And something else that was in my favor too is I worked during Bjorn Rebney's tenure in Bellator. I worked as a prime marketing consultant when I was managing Stephan Bonner, and I put that Stephan Bonner Forrest Griffin, not Stephan Bonner Forrest Griffin, but the Stephan Bonner Tito Ortiz fight together with all the hoopla. We brought a lot of the flair from pro wrestling. Stephan, I've wrestled him in pro wrestling too. He as well as broadcasted with him, man. He is a showman. He's a natural, great promo, and he got pushed Tito's buttons there in that promo to build up that fight. And it's the only time where Bellator ever beat UFC head to head in the ratings was when Stephan Bonner fought Tito Ortiz. So I've had the pleasure of doing so many great things, so many fun things. My primary occupation over the years has been in the liquor and booze business, which I got into way back in the day, back home in Connecticut, when I was bouncing at bars, when I met the guys after college that were in that industry, that were with that company I worked for. Was the old Bertazio Beverage, and then it became Northeast Beverage of Connecticut when Ken Mancini bought him out from Rhode Island. So I had the honor of working for them, and then went to work for breweries as a regional manager with Madcap Brewery. Moved down south, and I love it down here. But now I work for Berman Law Group, which is a really cool gig, really cool firm. I host the podcast, which everybody really check that out. You can go to John Elite's channel to see our last. We kind of merged with him. We're working with John. He has a massive following. And I've got Dan the Beast Severn going down with me a week from now. I've had Larry Mazza in studio. I've had Mike Dowd and John Elite. And we're looking forward to another good year. We're going to get more into the MMA guests now this year. So yeah, man, it's been a fun ride, wild ride over the years, and always enjoyed myself, and had a lot of fun gigs. That's the main thing. If you enjoy what you're doing, you never have to work in life.
Right. Yeah, that's true, man. Everybody says that, and it sounds like you've done quite a lot, and it's good to have all these different things going on, having more streams of income coming in. You know what I mean?
Get bored with stuff, man. I'll tell you, I got back into, since I've been down here in Florida. I got back into hunting. I always hunted like once a year or so, but got into turkey hunting. There's a lot of turkey here, and this is a cool area. And that's it. I do so many different things. I love the outdoors. I love to fish. I'm a beach bum. I love jet skiing. But I always do stuff for a while, and then I get bored, and then I do something else, you know?
Right. Yeah, because you were even like you. I think you were an author. You wrote your book. What year was that?
I did a couple different books. I did Rough and Tumble back, and we started writing that in 2007, and we just did the 12-year retrospective that I did with Eric Paulson. Eric Paulson is a true legend of no holds barred and MMA, the first world Shooto champion. He predates UFC, and I was training at his gym when I was living in Fullerton. I lived in Fullerton, California back in 2007 for a while when I was with the brewing company. And he started training there, and I had an old coach, Billy Wicks, that was an old carny that came out of the carnies. And they're the old catch wrestlers. And Eric loved that because he trained under old carnies too. And then in Japan, he trained under Toro Sayama and other name escapes me. I forget another Japanese gentleman, but it's such a great book, Rough and Tumble, because we chronicle the history of wrestling and MMA. And a lot of people don't know that MMA or no holds barred came out of professional wrestling, in Japan. And then at the carnivals in Brazil, the Gracie family, we chronicled the Gracie family. We chronicled, oh God, there's so many names. Give me a second because I can't forget this one. Mitsuya Maeda, who trained the Gracies, was an old judoka and catch wrestler. And the Gracie family, they ran the carnivals in Japan or in Brazil. And it's such a great book. You can get it at erikpaulson.com. The best place to get it. Don't get it on Amazon because they jack up the price, way too high on there. People buy it and resell it. Go to erikpaulson.com. If you go to Hannibal TV or Eric Paulson Combat Submission Wrestling YouTube page, you could see Eric and I did a 90-minute retrospective on the book. That's really awesome. Really get you fired up to read it. So yeah, that was a lot of fun. And then I did a book with Dan Severn too. It was called Too Handsome for Hollywood. It was a comedy book. And that's an ebook. That was a lot of fun. And then I did a cookbook too, Cooking with the King, because I had a podcast for years. 2014 or 2015, I think we started doing that podcast I had with Brian Snow, who used to call the Cubs games in Chicago. I played a prank on him. I was on his morning show with one of my fighters, Kamal Shalarus, to hype up a UFC fight Kamal had. And Kamal and I played a trick on the guy where I hung on the line with him and came on as a caller. And we went back and forth and did this comedy skit. And Brian loved it. So he asked me to do a show with him. And yeah, so I did that cookbook because Brian was a great guy, but he's 6'5" and he's huge. He's like 400 pounds. I think he's like, but he wanted to lose some weight. So I told him, you don't have to be all skinny, but you can, I could show you how to eat more healthy. So that was how we came up with doing the book. And then Gorgeous George, Stephanie Bellers, I wrote a book with her. She was Macho Man's valet, and then she was with the Misfits. She stayed with me for a while, and I wrote a book with her as well that never came out. She does a long interview with me on Hannibal about it, but it never came out. She just didn't want to finish it. And then I have a book that I've been working on with Stephan Bonner for the last, it's been 3 years now, called Chaotic Enlightenment. It's a really cool book, man, because he's really into positive vibrations and positive energy. And, he's a fighter, but he's also, everybody knows him from UFC, the Forrest Griffin, Stephan Bonner, Hall of Famer, but he's also like a real spiritual enlightenment kind of guy. And it's a really wild book, man. It's a cool book, but another one that we haven't finished yet, so so many different things have been going on over the years.
Yeah, I mean, geez, it sounds like it. I didn't even know you had all them books, and especially this other one. Have you talked much about it? This new one coming out?
The Chaotic Enlightenment. Yeah, man, we had talked about it on so many shows, so many podcasts with Bonner and I, like when we started doing it. We started doing it when we were hanging out together all the time. And then Bonner's had some health issues, man. He injured himself in a pro wrestling match.
Damn.
And it was covered with TMZ. He had some, issues, I think, with pain medication and stuff. And his house just burned down
Shit.
a couple weeks ago
How
in
the
Vegas.
hell did that happen?
I don't know, man. I don't know. And the thing is, like, Bonner's one of my great friend, but we don't talk as much anymore. Nothing happened. We didn't get into an argument or anything, but
Right.
just kind of go your separate ways. We used to have a lot of gigs together. We worked for a company in upstate South Carolina calling fights, and then I used to be in Vegas with him calling fights for another company and hanging out more. And then when we were together a lot, we had great times. But then when I don't see him anymore, 2019 was really like the last year we did stuff together. We did the Legends and Vixens. That was a lot of fun, man. Which you can check out that match if you type in UFC Bonner Intergender. It's not an intergender match, but it's a mixed tag match with the beautiful ladies of Oil Wrestling, the gorgeous Buns of Steel, Summer Steel, and the Strong Island Lolita, Gina Carucci. She was my tag partner, and Summer Steel was his tag partner. And that one's got over 11,000 views on one page and over 6,000 on another page. You can get it on Hannibal TV. It was a pay-per-view called Legends and Vixens. So it was a lot of the like really hot Instagram models, strippers that were part of this beautiful ladies of Oil Wrestling. And then Bonner and I headlined it from the MMA wrestling side. But it was a wild show that we did, pay-per-view that we did with Millionaire Fight Club, which is Mike Caramico's company. Another company that really kind of became defunct with Corona.
Yeah.
We did some other events together. I did King Mo. With King Mo, I broadcasted Caramico's Miami Vice Grip Grappling for a Cause down in Miami, which was a women's grappling tournament that was headlined by Andrea KGB Lee from UFC against Andy the Crazian Win. He also had a heavyweight tournament in Vegas that Bonner and I were calling before Corona, and that company kind of just disappeared. These companies, everybody knows the UFC, and I mentioned I worked for Bellator, but people don't realize there are so many. I mentioned Strike Off where I started broadcasting. There are so many of these MMA companies around the country, so many shows, around the country, some that have local TV, some that do pay-per-views. And, there's so many fights and there's so many fighters out there that, these companies come and go, they fly by night, and some of them are real scummy. Like in the bare knuckle boxing world, I talked on Hannibal. I managed Phil Baroni, the New York Badass, and he didn't get paid. Him and Chris Lieben both didn't get paid for that bare knuckle fight, and then the promoter ended up going to prison. Which kind of leads me to something we were talking about earlier. Most people don't know the history of the UFC. And there's so many different. It's weird because being an older man now, it's weird for me because, I mentioned guys that are Hall of Famers, legends in UFC. I used to do a lot of stuff with Pat Miletich. He's a UFC Hall of Famer. His team had all the belts, with Mathew and them and Tim Sylvia. And I mentioned them to people who, watch the UFC, they're UFC fans, and they might have started watching it a few years ago, and they don't know any of the history or the older fighters. And we were talking about earlier the history of UFC, and I know you've had a lot of gangsters on, the history of the UFC, the Fertitta brothers and the mob, where they got their money from. In Japan, you had Pride. Yakuza was notorious in Pride. Mark Coleman, Phil Baroni, good friends of mine that I managed that fought there. And they used to do is they come in the locker room, you're fighting a Japanese fighter, and they would tell you, you'll make double, if you dive tonight. And they were betting, and everybody in Japan, people were very scared of the Yakuza, and they've always been involved. But in the United States, with the Fertitta brothers, I mean, and a lot of people don't know this, the Fertitta family, with the Mathew family, they used to run Galveston, Texas. And they used to report to Carlos Marcello, and Carlos Marcello was out in New Orleans, notorious gangster. And the Fertittas were an original Sicilian mob family in Texas and in New Orleans. They started out in New Orleans. They moved to take over Galveston, and that was a time when they ran everything. They ran the police, they ran the judges, and it was a nice city. They had a beautiful casino on the water. They had the most brothels per square mile of anywhere. They made a lot of money on prostitution and gambling and drugs there. And they ran that city, and you had guys like Dean Martin, Tony Bennett that were playing shows there during that time frame. And what happened there was the Texas Rangers were actually the ones that broke Galveston up, and they were pretty corrupt too. But they came in and they ran the mob out of Galveston, and then the Fertittas came to Vegas. And the Fertittas' father is a character that's covered in the Casino movie. They cleaned all that money, and they started their own casinos in Vegas, and they were skimming too in Vegas. And they controlled Vegas to a certain degree, to the extent that when my buddy Art Davey, who was the original founder and owner of the UFC, they wanted to get sanctioning in Las Vegas. And Lorenzo Fertitta was on the athletic commission, and he squashed it, and then turned around a few months later after he devalued the company because they couldn't get sanctioning in Vegas, which became their hub. He squashed it and devalued the company, and then he bought the company cheaper, bought it for $2 million. And then he turned around and sold the company years later to Endeavor for $4.2 billion.
That's crazy. That's a big change. That's a huge profit.
Huge profit. And then a lot of people don't, and I share this experience I shared it on my buddy Gunner's show. Do you know Gunner? Yeah. Alan, he was part of his family was Toko family in Detroit, and he was involved in the life himself and went to prison and wrote a book, and he's wrote a great fiction book that's really good.
How to Be a King, right?
How to Be a King, yeah, really good book. And he had me on to discuss this. And what they did was, when you're a fighter and you're coming into UFC, you think, I'm going to make a fortune. This is UFC. Now, keep in mind, this is years ago. This is around 2008-ish, 2009, around that time frame, 2010. Kamal Shalarus, who I manage, great wrestler. If you ever want to see how good a fighter Kamal was, watch when he fights Khabib. A lot of people say Khabib is the greatest of all time. I think he may be pound for pound the greatest of all time, but he had a war back and forth with Kamal, and when they fought in UFC, gave Khabib his toughest fight. And he was undefeated in WEC on Versus Network. And then UFC bought the Versus Network, and they signed a select number of fighters over to UFC. So Kamal was one of those fighters. Mm-hmm. So I'll throw some numbers out there, and these may not be exact because it was some years ago, but they put him on a 3-year deal. And let's say it was a 7-7-10, right? So you get 3 fights a year, 7,000 your first fight, 7,000 your second, 10,000 your third, somewhere in that neighborhood back then. Right. You're thinking UFC, you're thinking you're going to make a lot more than that. Yeah. Well, where you made your money was your sponsors. Mm-hmm. And I'll give you the example of how they shook us down. at that time, I know Kamal was getting, he had 4 really good paid sponsors at that time.
Mhm.
And the sponsors are the ones you see on the shorts and the banners and all back in those days before the Reebok days, right? So
Mhm.
I know he was getting 10 grand a fight from Tap Out. So Mike Murch, who was the legal guy for Zuffa for UFC at that time, he calls me up and he goes, we need to go over Kumar's sponsors. Degrading and calls him Kumar. That's part of their tactic. And
Mhm.
then he goes, we need to go over Kumar's sponsors. He goes, I don't have a lot of time. He goes, be prepared with your contracts and numbers.
Yeah.
So we go to the first sponsor, Tap Out, and it's 10 grand. And he goes, oh yeah, we're going to take 6,500, right?
Really.
So you go down the list of the sponsors, and
Mhm.
he had taken over 11 grand in sponsor money, right?
Yeah.
But he's only paying him 7,000. And it was like that all the way up and down the card until you get to the co-main, and main event. And they still took their money too. So Art Davey and I figured this out on my old podcast, that
Mhm.
during the Zuffa era, for most of their shows, they weren't paying the fighters with their own money. They were paying them with the sponsor money.
Really. So they found a way to do
Bellator,
that.
Bellator, which was on Spike, same network when I worked for Bellator, same network, they didn't take a dime of fighter sponsor money. World Series of Fighting, you name any of the ones that were on TV, WEC, on Versus Network, they didn't, Legacy, all the ones that had TV deals, they didn't take any because they knew that was how the fighters made their money.
Right.
But Zuffa, UFC under Zuffa, they were getting more. They were basically doing an amateur shows during that era when the ratings were huge and they were getting big money pay-per-views,
That that
Yes.
that that is a good point you brought up, man. I mean, it's crazy, how different it is, from, like you said, the TV deals, and then the ones that you said basically was amateur. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
once
well,
you
this
get,
is UFC. I'm talking about, guys that were once you and there are MMA shows all over the country every weekend, and
yeah,
very few people make it to the UFC. And you think once you make it to UFC, you're going to make big money. It wasn't like that. It wasn't like that at all. That's why you see a lot of these guys that are still fighting and doing the bare knuckle stuff and having issues. They don't have a pension. It's not like NFL or NBA. And Dana White always used Vince McMahon's model. He says that. He met with Vince. That was how he used, to run his company.
yeah. So it's a lot different now. They get paid a lot better, you'd say?
Oh man, definitely. It's like night and day because Endeavor owns it now. It's
Oh,
not the Fertitas anymore. They made a fortune. They made their money. And it's interesting with Endeavor. President of Endeavor is the guy who the Ari character on Entourage is based on.
really?
Yeah, that's the guy who runs Endeavor. Endeavor is a huge international media company. It's not like it was.
So it's really blown up now.
Big. Oh yeah. Well, I don't think as many people are watching. The ratings aren't as big. I think in that sense it's becoming a niche, but
Hmm.
they're getting real big money TV deals now.
Damn. How come you
You
think
know,
that is?
well, it's different because they used to have to pay to be on TV. Now they got their big. It's WWF did the same thing.
Hmm.
WWE they get these big money TV deals now that they don't have to worry about the pay-per-view numbers as much anymore.
Yeah, I guess that's
You know,
true. Yeah, because I mean
yeah,
10 years ago, I mean it was a lot different, for the
yeah, because they
pay-per-views.
used to have big characters. Like people knew the fighters. I don't really everybody that I know that fought in UFC and that I trained with or cornered fights with is long gone. So I don't really follow it anymore.
Right. And when you were in this, you had your own character. You were a heel, is what they call it, right?
Yeah, I was a heel in pro wrestling and MMA. I'll tell you, I was so much of a heel in pro wrestling. I was a heel before I even got in the building. I was a heel in the parking lot because I used to do a gimmick where I was illegitimate son of the Iron Sheik. Hussein Hassan Vaziri. That was when I had black hair before my hair turned gray, and I had my mustache that I curled up.
Uh-huh.
And I got the heat coming in the building. I used to come in to the bigger shows, and I'd go do this like at APW and stuff, in Spartanburg, South Carolina. I had this gorgeous Libyan girl. She was a bartender at the Columbia, South Carolina Hooters, Amira Kapar, and I had her wear a gold bikini and a fur coat over it. And I get chauffeured to the arena. And when I get out of the car, I'd start bossing the chauffeur and yelling at him in Farsi, like fake Farsi. I learned some stuff from Kamal from Farsi, and she would be giving everybody dirty looks, like the women dirty looks, and I would intentionally park so that we had to walk through the people, so that by the time I got into that building, into that locker room, they already hated me, like they hated me beforehand. And I would yell. I would have her just stand there and look disgusted and plug her nose, and then I would yell at the kids like in fake Farsi, and the parents would be covering their eyes. That Sheik gimmick was really good. And then I did King of Connecticut gimmick where I was the Yankee Elvis and real haughty, and I came to the arena with toothbrushes, like when I faced my old rival from MMA and pro wrestling, Adam Newsom in Kentucky. I came with at Christmas time with all these toothbrushes to save the youth of Kentucky. It was a foreign object that they'd never seen before.
Oh man, yeah. So I'm sure that grew a lot of it to hate, but I mean that's what it is, it's the show, I mean it's how you build attention and you grab people's attention.
I don't think, I really don't think, Adrian, that wrestlers now really want to be heels. Like, I love to be hated. That's why I love doing my commentaries on Hannibal TV, because they get so much negative comments and attentions. I love it. And so Hannibal said to me, he said, "You're one of the last heels, because nobody wants to be hated anymore."
What do you think changed it? I mean, because that was since it started, they always had those heels.
Yeah, I mean, it's like they all want to be the same and they all want to be loved. And it takes a special person to love to be hated, I think.
How'd you deal with it with all those years? I mean, even to now.
I love it. I love being it. I don't mind heat. It's more entertaining. It's a lot more fun. I wish everybody well. I don't know if you saw my feud with Ric Flair.
Oh no, I didn't. What happened with that?
Oh man, I gotta explain that again. So that started on Hannibal. So they wanted Rick.
Yeah.
I've known Rick for a long time. I knew him years ago when I helped his son Reed. That was an amateur wrestler. I first met Rick when he had his boat on Lake Murray, and I was bouncing at Docksides, and he was drowning his sorrows. He was married to snotty Tiffany that thought she was too good for everybody. And so I met him then, and then Lake Lanier, when he first was with Wendy, went out and I brought a gorgeous girl, Gloria, that I was with, Mexican and Lebanese, and he loved her. He was like, "Oh, you're so exotic. You're so exotic." So I got Evan, who's my producer for my show. He goes, "Get us Ric Flair," because they want him to host an event and come on the podcast. So I started talking to him again, and he goes, "Matt, you got any pictures? Any pictures of that girl you're with, Lake Lanier? You know the one I'm talking about."
Oh shit! There goes the phone. I think you got him muted.
Yeah, hold on.
You got a little too excited, man.
Yeah, all I had to do was move. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, but I can't see you.
Oh man, I think oh, you know what happened too? It looks like it overheated.
Oh shit!
The video overheated. Damn. Hold on. Yeah, I got a note here that it's overheated. Your video is stopped overheated, so we may have to do the rest of it just with audio.
Yeah, that's cool, man.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah. So you won't get the visuals about the Ric Flair thing. So are you still able to hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you perfect.
Yeah. So anyway, when I contacted him, he asked me if I still had any pictures of her, and I said no, but I've got pictures of Glory Differente that was living with me, beautiful Venezuelan singer. You guys can all check her out. So sent him some pictures of her, and then I had met this beautiful girl at the airport, and I sent some videos of her to Rick, and he loved them. Oh, he's going crazy. There's some saucy videos. He was going, "Oh, Matt, you're the man. You're the man." And then he calls me, and he goes, "Matt, you got to call Wendy. You got to call Wendy and tell her you meant to send those videos to your other friend, right? Your other friend."
God.
So I said, I was preoccupied, so I didn't respond. And then he starts texting me later that night, all in caps. And this is, you can see this on the Hannibal. If you go on Hannibal TV, you type in King of CT, Ric Flair, you'll see all these commentaries. He says, "Matt, killed yourself. You never called Wendy." And then he goes, and as for those girls you send me pictures and videos, they just don't stack up to my Wendy. So you could see Wendy was right there with.
Oh shit, you hit mute.
Oh, sorry.
That's good.
So it was, yeah. So no, so it's hilarious. So we did one commentary, and then I sent a picture of myself at the pool to Wendy, and she goes, "Come to Rosemary," because they're in Rosemary Beach, Florida. She goes, "Come to Rosemary." She goes, "Rick is unbearable." Like after they announced that they're split, she goes, "Rick is unbearable. Come, let's have some mimosas." Well, she sends that, and she sends it to Rick, because I get my message back with my picture and our message. And he goes, "Matt, why don't you just send her a picture of your little prick?
Oh
This
my
you
God.
bastard." He goes, "I'm going to find out where you live. I'm coming for you."
Really?
And I said, so I sent him back. I said, "I can't fit it in the picture. I don't have the wide angle lens."
Oh my
And he goes, "You're a dead man. Funny man. You're a dead man." And so he says all stuff. And then I get a call like the next day. It's like from a private number. And I didn't know it was Rick. And he goes, "You stay out of Rosemary. Just like stay out of Dodge. You stay out of Rosemary. You stay out of Rosemary." So it was funny. So we did the whole commentaries, like with his messages. He gave me some good material. And I always say, I wish Rick and Wendy well, but like I said in my promo, Rick, she's 2 cup sizes too small, and she's 40 years too old for this king.
Oh my God. So what does he
And
say?
then-
He gets all pissed off.
Yeah, and then I went on a wrestling.
Oh, he hit mute again.
I went on a wrestling show with Reed Flair's friend and protege. They were teammates in amateur wrestling, and Reed, his son that passed away, and he came out and confronted me, and I choked him out, and I put him in the figure 4. And then I took the mic, and I said, "Hey Rick, I stole your woman, and I stole your hold, and if you still had it, I'd steal your gold." Woo! We had a great feud back and forth, and Arn Anderson wants to hit me with the spine buster now at the Gathering wrestling show this summer. So we'll see if that happens. But it's all at Rick's. Rick basically gave us all this material that
Right.
nature bought.
So this was all real, though. I mean, like on the
Yeah, it was all real. That's the best. I mean, that's like the Attitude Era. I mean, you've gotta create storylines off of real stuff going on.
Yeah, I mean that's crazy. I mean how that all went down, and I mean now it could be perfect for your guys's next show. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it was all. Well, these guys that do the Gathering, the promoters, they Arn Anderson, who is Ric Flair's partner with the Four Horsemen, he doesn't speak to Rick in real life anymore, and he wants to be part of it. He wants to be part of the whole thing. And Mark Madden, that did Rick's podcast with him, has come out and said some stuff. And I just said, Rick, Rick likes to have the pops in the afternoon. I do too, but he's an angry drunk, and he just needs to turn his phone off. I wish him well, but just turn your phone off, brother. It doesn't make me upset, but a lot of people, if you threaten them like that, they're going to take it a little more seriously.
Right. So
Yeah,
yeah, it's good just to turn that phone off, man. If you start calling people and talk shit, you know what I mean?
Yeah, when I was younger, I used to do that. Like I would be like do stupid stuff, and then I'd never remember it, and then the next
Yeah.
day, and I mean, but he's an older man. He's a much older man. I mean, I'm an older man. He's an old man. He should know better than that now. But I wish
Yeah.
him well. I wish the nature boy. Well, he's having fun. He's at Hogan's Bar all the time, which isn't far from here. He's at Hogan's Bar in Clearwater Monday nights. I might have to go out there and confront the nature boy.
Go pay him a visit. Oh my God. You think that would go sideways?
Oh, he would flip if he saw me. He's legitimately angry at me. So I think it would be great if we filmed it, though.
Yeah. Go in there with the camera.
Yeah. So how did things go with Larry? I started watching a little bit of your episode with Larry. Did you do that down here, or was that a virtual one?
There was a virtual one. So we did it on Zoom, kind of like how me and you are doing it right now. But I reached out to him because I seen him on Bobby Luisi's show, and that was when I was first dipping into the whole mob genre. And, he was a really good guy. We talked for maybe an hour or so, and then, we stayed in contact through Facebook and stuff. And then we ended up doing another live with me, him, Bobby, Polly, another buddy of ours, Bill Stacks, and then Colby Roy. He's another podcaster. But yeah, I mean, shit, we did that. People really liked it. They enjoyed it. So I was thinking about maybe doing another one. Well, we are going to do another one for sure. But I mean, I think it'd be a good one, to have you on there too. I mean, because you said because you were kind of affiliated with John A-Light then, right?
Well, I know John for years because we have a mutual friend,
Right.
Phil Baroni, that I mentioned before. So Phil Baroni's father was a Gold Star detective, and he was Johnny's partner with the Gambino family shortly before his retirement. We talk about it on my show. And Phil, my buddy Phil, my old training partner that I managed for his fight career, he lived with John when he was younger, and Phil did a lot of scores with them. And he actually, a lot of people don't know this. I mentioned it on the show. Phil, when he was wrestling at Hofstra in Long Island, the college, he got stabbed up in the back of the head because he was beating these guys down because he was kind of Phil's crazy. He's a real wild guy. He was stealing from the guys he was collecting with, not from. And he got stabbed up. He almost died. And that's when I moved Phil out to Michigan. And that ties in with Dan Severn. So the mob stuff and the fight stuff in my life ties a lot together. He moved in with Dan. Dan was coaching at Michigan State at the time, and I couldn't get Phil into Michigan State. He was a good wrestler, but I got him into Eastern Michigan to wrestle, and Dan kind of took him under his wing, and that's how Phil got into MMA, was through that. And Phil, a lot of people don't know either, Phil's great uncle was Captain Lou Albano, the WWF Captain Lou Albano. And then Phil had a great career in UFC and Pride, and then I got him into pro wrestling. But Dan also did some stuff for Sammy Gravano, and he doesn't like Sammy Gravano. We're going to talk about, I'll keep that for this show. I'm doing a show with Danny B. Severn and John Elate, and our podcast studio.
Oh, you guys are going to do one?
Yeah, I'm bringing Dan down because he's going to be with me next week doing some seminars, and I'm bringing Dan down to do our show, TBT podcast, and then do the John Elite show after with John and Mike Dowd, and we're going to talk about some Sammy Gravano stuff because Sammy was, to me, I always say, like, to call him a scumbag is insulting to use condoms because he put a lot of people, forget about John Gotti, he put a lot of people in, and a lot of people don't know, and this ties in with Dan's stuff, that he was doing his ecstasy ring in Arizona, which was when he knew Dan. He had nothing to do with the mob at that time. And he tried to throw his own kids under the bus. Yeah, I mean, he's a real dirtbag, and he's being Valuetainment is right up the road from us in Boca. We went over there and did some stuff with those guys with our podcast.
Mhm.
And I like Michael Francis. I don't know Michael, but he's a great broadcaster. Sammy to me is just disgusting, human being who's going to try to throw his own kids under the bus to save his own ass, So yeah, when it comes to that stuff with John, John is doing his show now from our studio in Boca Raton, Berman Law Group. And if anybody has has been involved in a car accident or any accidents, they can message me. They can DM me on my Matthew J Granahan Facebook. We can do cases in all 50 states for personal injury. But yeah, I know John. I've known John for a long time, the thing with this is it's weird because that's not stuff that normally we would talk about. And I say this, and I said this to Larry when I had him in, and I've said this to John. In New York, they're very showy. They have the social clubs, and there's 5 families, and people on the street know who they are. Philly's like that, but the whole thing with Cosa Nostra is supposed to be quiet. And the other aspect of it that you get a tainted view is from these guys that were cooperators, is they say that everyone who's in that life is going to end up dead or in prison. Well, I mean, I can name you a dozen guys who went off into the sunset with millions, that were involved in that life, from back home. So
Okay.
it's you get a tainted view when you talk to these cooperators. I love Larry. He's a great guy, and he cooperated against the feds, so he's a little different, and John went down to Brazil, to avoid all of that. But it's a different world. I mean, with these guys, and it's very unique now. I mean, it kind of happened during Corona, where this mob genre just exploded.
Yeah, it really did.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it, like it didn't exist. I interviewed on my old podcast, 2015. I interviewed Tony Knapp because I knew Tony really well before he died. Tony Knapp was Tony Napoli. His father was capo of the Genovese family,
Damn.
and they were involved in Vegas.
Mhm.
When I used to go out to Vegas, years ago, they still had involvement with Vegas when most of the mob was out in Vegas. And Tony Knapp did a great book, My Father, My Don. But when I interviewed Tony, he was in his 80s.
Yeah.
And he died a few years later. But when I interviewed Tony in 2000, I think it was 2015, nobody was interviewing mob guys like that.
Yeah, that was way before. I guess you were ahead of the curve. ahead of your time. I mean, and now
Yeah,
look at the shit now. I mean, everybody's doing it.
it's crazy because it was stuff you never speak of,
Yeah.
and now it's become bigger than the it's like the real stuff has become bigger in a lot of sense, really, than the movie, than the fake stuff, than the Sopranos and the movie stuff, which it's wild to me. It's crazy to me.
Yeah, people love it, man, and like you said, it's new to everybody and just blew up. So yeah, I'm kind of part of that. That curve. I mean, I just came in. I mean, I've been doing it since the beginning of this year. So it's only like 4 months in.
Yeah, and it's interesting because different groups, like with the Italians now, they're talking, but like you're not going to hear a lot from Russians, or you're not going to hear Yakuza guys out there talking. You're not going to hear Armenians. Armenians have run a lot of rackets in Myrtle Beach, and elsewhere, and even down here in Florida. You're not going to hear them talk. But and the other thing is they're talking about things that happened years ago too.
Right.
But it's wild. People are fascinated by it. I think it's becoming a little oversaturated now, though.
Yeah, I mean, that's why, I mean, they have so many stories to tell, I mean, and once you run out, you got to find some other kind of content, to put out there, I mean, I don't know, but, I mean, like Bobby Luisi, he has his own preaching, YouTube channel he started now
Yeah.
too, so, I mean, he can do both, I mean, but, like you said, I might, run out of shit to say, so I mean, you always got to have different stuff going on, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, and if you think about it, there's a show that Massimo talked about. We had Massimo Battista on, who's right from Italy, from Naples, on with John. I brought him in to talk with John last time I was down there in Boca, and his whole thing is with, and then people don't know they use the word mafia, which is a Sicilian organization. Really, in America, is Cosa Nostra, but he's Gomorrah. It sounds like almost Sodom and Gomorrah. From Naples, and he was saying about that how popular that show was. I think it's on HBO, the Gomorrah show. Which I don't know if have you seen that? Because I was going to say there aren't a lot of big mob shows on anymore. But
No, I don't think I've seen that one.
It's supposed to be really good. It's based in Italy. It's the Gomorrah, and then I can never pronounce the one that's from Calabria. And they're big. They're all over the world. The Andretta, but
Yeah,
everybody
I'm not
always
gonna be able to say it.
I can never pronounce it. Massimo know how to pronounce it properly, but there's not a lot of mob shows. I mean, The Sopranos. God, it was funny because at that time, in the real world, they were emulating what they saw in The Sopranos.
Right. Yeah, and it lasted a long time.
Yeah, because
It had a lot of seasons.
It lasted a really long time. It was funny because when The Sopranos first started, I was bouncing, and then I managed a club that was, tied in with, was mobbed up, and it was funny to see these guys that are emulating the way people are on the show, and then they started all kissing each other. Like, you never did that. What the fuck are you doing? It's weird. They were emulating. It's like art imitates life, and life imitates art.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, because then they start picking up, the sayings
Stuff
and
from the
shit from the
show.
movie.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's funny. Yeah, from the show.
Yeah.
And I think when The Godfather came out, it was like that. It was kind of like that too. Yeah, but that's a great genre. I mean, it would be if you could be one of the first to do this. And I'll give you an idea because you have a good podcast. If you did a show, and I can even give you some people you could talk to.
Okay.
About how powerful the Yakuza was during Pride Fighting Championships.
Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna have to look at this up. After we wrap this up, I'm down. Let's talk more about it if you got time.
Yeah, I wanted to do. There's a guy named Bob Carson. He's an MMA journalist. For years, he used to cover all the UFCs and Bellator shows, and he said to me, we ought to do a documentary on the Yakuza and Pride.
Mm-hmm.
And they also were heavily involved with pro wrestling over there, New Japan. But their involvement with Pride was tied in with gambling. I mean, there were a lot of Pride fights that were suspect. If a lot of fight fans know that, but I've even got guys I can give you that will tell you how it worked and how they came in the locker room. Phil was approached, and he never hesitated. I mean, a lot of people thought his Lieben fight were the guy that ran that bare knuckle boxing company. The matchmaker left and came out and told everybody that fight was fixed so they could bet on it. But you know how that, if your listeners don't know how that works, if you know who's going to win, the outcome, you can bet real heavy on it.
Yeah, exactly.
Fight. And that's what was going on for years in Japan with the Yakuza. And the Yakuza is still very powerful in Japan. And you don't see former Yakuza coming out speaking.
No, it's a lot different, because I don't know, maybe, they don't fuck around, what I mean? Like, they're still active.
Sure.
So they don't want to say shit, those guys are still around.
And I'll tell you my perspective of what's going on in I think what's happening in New York is it's become more like Connecticut was, where they're quiet, and they're not showy, but also it's like if you back home, it used to be like you had a guy who was a slumlord, basically, that had a lot of properties, and was also that you could use the word Shylock or loan shark. It was also had the loan sharking business. That was also dealing drugs. That was also a bookie.
Right.
You know, all within that network. And I think that that's probably what's going on. That's what goes on in the Armenian, in the Greek, and in the Greek communities is more, you know, and they do it just within their own community. You
Yeah,
know,
they
and
don't
I
go
think
to
that's,
branch off too much.
yeah, and I think they're being really quiet. I mean, which is the way really all the organized crime originated. You know, do you know the story? And I was told this because my grandparents were Sicilian. Do you know the story of where the word mafia, where that word came from?
I kind of heard a little bit about it. Can you explain it?
Yeah, well, the way I was told was Sicily was always a conquering route,
Uh-huh.
and it was conquered by the Arabs for hundreds of years, by the Moors, by the Normans, by the Greeks, and by the French. And when the French were occupying the island, they the whole organization, people were very quiet, and they were very underground about everything because they were being occupied. And the fable, the way that the fable is told of how the word comes from is there was a woman running through the streets that was screaming "Mafia, Mafia," and Mafia in Sicilian dialect means my daughter. And she said her daughter had been raped.
Oh, now I
And
know what story. Yeah.
so they dragged the guy out in the dead of night, you know, and hung him from a tree, like in the public square, like for the French occupiers to see and everything. And that's the fable, you know, where the story, you know, a fable comes from. So it's supposed to be like underground kind of thing. Like you need money, they're gonna lend you money, you know, and all of that.
Damn. Yeah, now I remember. Yeah. See, I heard it one time, you know, but I couldn't recall it more or recall it as much as you explained it. But yeah, no, I mean,
Yeah. I think it was
yeah, it
my
started
uncle
off
told me that. Yeah.
all because of that, you know, and you know, I see why they would do that, you know, why they would form the group, the mafia like that, you know, because it started out to be, you know, protection, you know what I mean?
And every group, every ethnic group has that. Not every, but a lot of ethnic groups have that.
Yeah.
You know, back home, you know, we had a lot of Greeks, and there were a lot of Greek bookies, loan sharks. You know, same thing in different communities. And I was with the Venezuelan, you know, for years, and then in the South American communities, it's very similar when it comes to money lending or anything to do with gambling. They may gamble on different sports. They may gamble on what we call soccer, but all of that still exists. It's that the Italian mob was so glamorized by Hollywood, and also had so much power at one point, you know, with the government, with, you know, with Kennedy and with
Yeah.
you know, wanting to kill Castro and all of that, you know, and that became, you know, and then the movie, the Godfather movie, you know,
Yeah.
which when that movie came out, a lot of people got really angry. Like my grandfather was real angry. Like they had that whole organization, the Italian American Civil Rights League, that with Joe Colombo, you know, to keep that movie from coming out.
But
You
it
know,
still surfaced.
yeah, well, yeah, I mean, but they basically got to get like permission for that movie to come out, and they never used the word. They never used the M word. They never said mafia in that movie. It might have in The Godfather 2,
Yeah.
but
Everybody
there
knew what
was,
was up.
yeah, and you know, Jimmy Hoffa, the
Yeah.
whole deal with Jimmy Hoffa. I mean, I will tell this family story. My cousin is Kathleen. She was Kathleen Granahan, and she was the first female attorney general in Pennsylvania. And
Damn.
she was indicted and convicted and went to prison. She's out now, and she's still, you know, traumatized from it. But she wanted me to do her book, but then she couldn't profit from it but her husband had a big warehouse trucking company in Pennsylvania, in Scranton. Her husband's grandfather was Bill Buffalino, and he was covered in that movie, The Irishman. And they did a whole Nightline thing on her when she was going through it. And in Pennsylvania, there was still a lot of power, a lot of mob power within, and that was what our book was going to be about, how they helped her get to the attorney general's office. So,
That's interesting. I mean, yeah,
yeah,
so she got help from them.
she got help to get in, and then Chris was beating her husband was beating her. She tried to get away from him. That's when all her trouble started to happen. And I felt like she was framed. It was a BS thing, but she got indicted and convicted on some stuff. And then she didn't want to do the book because she couldn't profit from it. She was convinced that she was not going to be convicted, but the system is, rigged to a large degree. People have power,
Yeah. And
but
they
they
can
used to
kind of make
have,
the
like,
shots.
yeah, I mean, in New York, they haven't had any real power for a while with unions and stuff. But I mean, I know AJ Galante. I set him up with Julia D'Amato, and they did that Netflix special about him and his dad and Danbury Thrashers. His dad was a gangster, but they were very tight-lipped. If you ask AJ, he's going to tell you his dad's just a hardworking man.
Right.
My dad's just a hardworking man. In New York, they're going to tell you everything. They're going to tell it's so much different.
Yeah. Well, we are hitting that hour point. Did you have anything else that you wanted to add before we wrap up?
Yeah, anybody who was watching this in Florida, I'm going to be with Dan the Beast Severn down in Unlimited Kickboxing in Merritt Island. We're going to be doing a seminar down there a week from today at 6 p.m., right around this time. And then in addition to that, you can go to Matthew J Granahan and follow me on Facebook. You can watch my old podcast, King's Court, if you just Google KING with a money sign court. And you can watch my new show at Berman Law Group on John Elite's channel. Go check out the episode I just did with John. It's an hour long, but well worth it. Very entertaining. And check out all my stuff on Hannibal TV, on the Hannibal TV Canada's top combat sports podcast with over 365,000 subscribers. And I have tons of stuff on there, from techniques to commentaries to reviews from Dark Side of the Ring to wrestling matches to grappling matches. I got tons of stuff on there on that channel. Hannibal's a great guy. Check out his other content as well. I always want to give him a plug because I've been a personality on his show for some time.
I've seen that, yeah. So a lot of stuff for everybody to check out. Thank you all for watching, and stay tuned for more.
Thank you. Now, just let me know when this will be available as well, and we